Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shawn Faba, and today it gives me great pleasure to talk to you about screening media. My title this afternoon is called Finding the Balance Between Real Life and Open Area by Using Blended Screening Media. Basically, what I'm trying to achieve this afternoon, there's two things. I want to deal with the section, the first part of my presentation will deal with the relationship between real life and open area. The second part of this presentation will deal with the relationship of the screening process and how to use blended screening media in achieving your efficiencies. Okay, the following contents which I will follow is a relationship between open area versus real life, and I'll look at the different screening phases and as well the solution, which is blended screening media. What is real life in the context of screening? Real life, basically, what we call it, is the length of time the screening media remains effective in the application until it's such time it needs replacement. How do we know that it's time for the screening media to be replaced? There's two types of instruments we're using. We're using what we call panel wear rates. In each and every panel, as you can see here, this is a type of panel which has got skid bars, and the other panel there is got, it's just a simple plain panel. In other words, we've got 4 wear indicators. Once all 4 wear indicators are exposed, and then we know it's a time for the panel to be replaced. So in other words, the difference between the two, with the one with the skid bars, typically the skid bars increase the life of the media itself. We get two types of screening media. We get steel and then we get synthetic. Synthetic falls under what we call polymer and rubber. So what we found that not all the screens media wear at the same time because of the open area. Widely used in the past was woven area largely because of percentage open area. And currently what is commonly used in minerals processing is polyurethane and rubber screening. So this is where we're going to look at the trade-off between the two, because often customers seek for a greater open area to increase their throughput. But we will look at the trade-offs between the two. So typically here, ladies and gentlemen, what I have is open area versus real life. The first example, what we have here, it's screen number A in the form of a screen panel. And the second example is screen B. They're both identical, but the difference between the two is the thickness, what we call in screening media perforated thickness. But for simplicity purposes, I've made use of woven wire for ease of understanding. So the difference coming in between the two, if you notice over here, you have a 31% open area. The reason being, you've got a slight thicker wire. And on the side, you've got about 45% open area for the exact same size screening media. So what is the difference between the two? One, you get effectively an increase in open area, meaning that you get more throughput. But the trade-off is as follows. The one with a greater open area generally wear much faster than the one with the increased life. So there is a trade-off between the two, so you can't have it both ways. So my presentation, ladies and gentlemen, seek to find a solution how to balance this process. What is the importance of screening within a screen flow sheet? Typically, screening is used in a process flow sheet to develop feed envelopes. What do I mean by feed envelopes? In other words, each and every stage requires a feed envelope which is proceeding from one process to the other. So why am I even mentioning this importance of this screening process at this stage? For effective screening to take place, there are 3 things we are looking at screening. The first being what we want to find out, we know that your width determines your capacity and your length determines your efficiency. That is for effective screening. Then the other processes we want to look at is stratification. That is a process which takes place during the feed. So in other words, what you have, you're having material spreading across your feed end. At phase A and B, what you want to achieve 90% screening efficiency over there. And then the remainder of the screening section, you're looking at B and C, where you further want to optimize your screening in terms of efficiencies. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, what we found that in screening, profits comes in with in three distinct phases. One phase being what we call the layered phase. What is currently happening at this phase? Typically, you need to optimize in such that, because by understanding the PSD, this area needs to be impact resistant. What we mean by that, you need to have panels which can last for so long throughout the application. Secondly, it is followed in this section, we're talking about the basic phase, which indicates that that is your classification section, where you typically need screening media, which has a balance in wear life and open area. The last phase is called a sharp phase. At this phase, you typically want to optimize your screening application. So what you saw up there was one of the screening processes, which we call that the screening which is finishing too early. What is currently happening in that stage is that the risk to a customer is losing the maximum screening area. In other words, what happened there is that the screen is typically using only the 2/3 of the screening media, meaning the rest of the screen is not utilized effectively, as you can see on the last tail end of the screen itself. The associated cost, for example, if you look at iron ore on a 12-foot by 20-foot machine, just in downtime, the cost to change the changeouts there on your feed section, it can go as up to 16 to 20,000 US dollars an hour just for changeovers. Then we got another scenario we depicted as well, where a screening effectively is not completed. Typically, this is a very critical phase in screening. What you have here, you're having a mixture of material moving and separating everywhere else. But what we're looking at, we are looking at what is happening at your discharge end. Typically what is happening at that discharge end, you're having a carryover of material, what is something which needs to be avoided. Typically in areas where the product is cut sensitive and no form of misplacement of material is required. And I should also mention that at that area as well, it is associated with huge fines and penalties. The reprocessing cost, which I just want to point out, due to this effect and recirculating load, meaning that you constantly need to rescreen your product to achieve the desired size fraction. So that is associated with your reprocessing cost, which is energy wastage. Optimal screening, that's where we want to be. What we can see here versus the first where we saw that the screening is finished too early, there is quite a trade-off between the two. What we see here is that effectively although we are achieving our optimum screening, but the screen is not effectively being used still. So in other words, we need to maximize the screening efficiency. Here again, because of changeouts, most of your screening happens in the first 2/3 of the screen. Effectively, that's a screening area where you keep on changing your media. In screening optimization, ladies and gentlemen, there are five integral steps you follow before you effect the changes. One step being you look at your vibration analysis. The purpose of doing a vibration analysis is to determine your operational conditions of your screen. Once you've satisfied yourself with the operational condition of your screen, you look at your machine inspection. You look at your coil spring, what we call isolation buffers, if there's no further deflections. You look at the stiffness of your side plate. You look at the cross members, because often we proceed making these changes where else there's either a deflection of a screen where your material would effectively move sidewise. So you need to satisfy yourself with all those conditions. Thirdly, you need to do what we call a screen media audit. What do we mean by screen media audit? Screen media audit, you need to have a fair understanding of your PSD. You need to have a fair understanding of the process of the application itself. Issues such as pegging and blinding, and issues I've dealt with in my previous slides, such as screening not being finished on time, etc. The fourth step is the phase where you start to make the recommendation of the appropriate screening media which can be effective for a particular application. Because every application is unique. It differs to one to the other. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, before implementation of the changes, I should mention that you gradually, within screening, you gradually making the changes until you reach the optimal screening efficiency. This is which I deem by far the most critical part of this presentation. Often when it comes to the selection of the aperture shape is overlooked. And the science behind this is got a great deal in how it affects your downstream processes as far as screening optimization is concerned. For example, a square aperture would cut, for example, at 80%. And the condition for that particular square aperture would change. When you suddenly incline your screen, it becomes a different ball game altogether. If we look at, for example, I'm going to just go and not in orderly fashion. If you look at a hex, for example, it cuts at about 85%. There again, the condition changes constantly. What is the reason behind this? The reason behind this is to show that you can effectively play around with your aperture configurations to find that balance between real life and open area. At this stage, ladies and gentlemen, I want to point out to you what the use of deck map design is very critical in optimization. The other point I want to also bring to your attention is to have a fair understanding of the overall mass balance and the process in the application itself. Why do we even mention making a big fuss about the use of deck maps? Number one, the deck maps strategically allowed us to start with, at the feed end, to place different types of material which is relatively suitable for a particular application. And as well, the area which I refer to as for screening optimization, where you can effectively, using various size aperture shapes, in order to increase the real life of the midsection there, which is to find that optimal balance between the two. As you can see over there, what you see there effectively at the feed end there, because of the nature of this particular application where they were throwing 600 millimeters boulders. So it goes without saying, at this area of the feed end, you would go with what we call the hard stick, 100 thick screening media. Because this is a particular scalping application, you would go with the following orientation with a long slot, and as you further go down, the slope decreases, you continuously changing the direction of that slot to further optimizing your screening efficiencies. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point, I just want to thank you for listening. That's the end of my presentation.